afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Reserve Review. We have Michael Peck on today. He's retired Army Colonel. He is a longtime member of ROA and many other military organizations that he's involved with. And we brought him on today actually initially to talk about him as part of Faces of ROA series, but we are going to actually talk about membership today. So welcome, sir. Thank you for coming on today. We've already talked a little before I hit the record button, so welcome, introduce yourself, and let everybody know kind of what you'd love to touch on today, because it's a really important topic.
Well, my emphasis in ROA, I've been a member since 1975, and my emphasis is on legislation. Because of ROA, I represent the organization with the Illinois Veterans Advisory Council, and I'm the current chairman. And in that position, we do an annual report required by law to the governor and state legislature on bills affecting guardsmen, reservists, and veterans. And in that capacity, this past year, we just had an outstanding year. We got 10 out of 13 bills through. And these bills not only affect veterans, but they provide services to the veterans' family, and in particular, those mobilized guardsmen and reservists.
We talked a little bit about membership. And I know you have a lot to say about membership and bringing in new members. ROA is actually an incredible organization that people don't realize all of what ROA really does and what those bills mean for families and that kind of thing. I would love for you to talk about the four things that we talked about earlier.
Well, our most important bill we ever got through was in 1990. And that was the year that we had the problem with the gays in the military issue. And because of that, our state university wanted to force ROTC off campus. ROA with Senator Judy Bar Topinka went to Springfield, and we introduced a bill that would stop that, because our position was, this is a federal issue. All you're going to do by kicking ROTC off campus is to deprive minorities and women of needed ROTC scholarships and deprive the military of needed junior leadership. Well, we passed the bill. Our governor vetoed the bill, Jim Edgar. But we overrode the veto, and we saved ROTC in Illinois today. Wow. The other most important bill, and this was our department convention at the Elks Club in Des Plaines, Illinois. We passed a resolution that created the Army Reserve Command, which is, everybody knows today, we've gone from a strategic reserve to a tactical reserve. And that's because of the fact that we have made sure that the Army Reserve has the money to train its troops.
That's great. So how do you think grassroots efforts play into all of this with ROA?
It's absolutely necessary. And in Illinois, I make sure that in each of my congressional districts, and we just lost one congressional district, we have ROA representation. That ROA representative knows the congressperson, can pick up the phone and call them. Now, they don't have to talk to the representative, but they have to let that staffer know what we're interested in, and we have that contact. I talk with a guy by the name of Kwame Crawford almost every day. He is the senior advisor to Senator Duckworth, and I talk with Senator Durbin's people. As you may know, we just passed with the what was called the Honor the PAC Act, which now has to be reintroduced because it added dollars, and any bills with dollars in it has to start in the House. But that's a very important bill, and because we're looking at what we call the burn pit issue and those diseases that result of the burn pits.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to legislative, I remember when I was an ROTC cadet, and I even think I may have some kind of a award or certificate from ROA from 2004, I think. What do you say to these young cadets coming into the Reserve and Guard who know that that's going to be their career track 100%, and they don't know where to go for support? I feel like ROA could be a great place for them to connect.
I'm glad you asked that, because my stump speech is, when I go to these universities to present the medals and that, it says, remember the soldier's creed, the 11th line, I am a professional, I'm an expert. Well, if you're a professional, you belong to your professional association. And what does that association do for you? It provides mentoring, it provides networking, it provides education, and most importantly, it provides legislation. And that legislation in our congressional charter is to maintain adequate national security and the execution thereof. and we can only do that. We have fewer and fewer veterans in Congress, and especially in the state house anymore. So the veteran, and there's only 1% of us. I mean, we're a nation of 325 million, with only 3 million young men, women, and serving. So that veteran back home, he is the expert for that representative to go to for information on veterans issues and national security.
And one thing I've heard you say is that not all good ideas have to come from Washington, that some of our local communities are, full of ways that we can impact our community and partner with other people in the community.
I remember our 1994 department convention, and it was an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, Tom Hillquist. He was looking at the Air Force Reserve budget, and then he looked at the Army. He says, Peck, where's your training dollars? I said, well, we're a line item on the Army budget. Well, the Air Force Reserve has its own training budget. And at that point, we passed a resolution to create the Army Reserve Command. This started at the Elks Club in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1994. And within 2 years, Senator Nunn from Georgia and Les Aspin got it through the Congress, and the Army Reserve Command exists today because of an Air Force colonel looking at the Army Reserve budget.
Wow. See, these stories are so amazing because people think sometimes that just their local, organization, it doesn't matter what you're a part of. We talked about VFW and all the other different VSOs out there that you can be part of. And as part of ROA, I feel like they underestimate the influence that their voice can have in an organization like this, because I've seen how people bring resolutions into ROA and then the committees look at them and say, is this something we're going to bring to Congress? And it can come from anywhere. I'm, all over the
Absolutely. Your DD 214-1, that was an ROA initiative, and that was a very important one. We introduced a bill last year in Illinois, Senate Bill 71, to give admission to the veterans homes for Guard and Reserve retirees. Well, the problem is there are many Guard and Reserve retirees who don't have a DD 214, so that doesn't make them a veteran. ROA in Memphis passed the resolution to give these people with 20 years of service Title 38 status, and that will allow them to be admitted to state veterans homes. And it's important. I mean, it wasn't their fault they never got mobilized. They volunteered to do it, but they just didn't get the call.
Right. And that was something told to me, that if you go to Iraq, then that gives you your golden ticket to get all the benefits. But if you don't, and then I thought, well, what about all those years of people drilling and training and going on other things that are not considered combat? Because there's other tours you can do. So this really unifies service for all of us who spend any amount of time in the military. As soon as you get out, that's the first thing people do is go to the VA and register.
And it's those state veterans homes are one of the great benefits that we have because we're getting older, we get dementia, and we don't want our families having to take care of us. And the veterans homes here in our state do a great job.
Yeah, we do. We were lucky here too as well. And I think that's one thing well, before I even say anything about that, I was going to ask you, what if you could give an elevator pitch to a young family with one or more service members actively in the Guard and Reserve, to join ROA, what would you tell them the importance of it is?
Well, the importance is to give yourselves a stronger voice. I mean, we have the congressional charter, yes, but without the numbers, we don't have a strong voice. And like I said, that's the first thing that politicians ask me. Mike, who do you represent? Well, fortunately, as the chair of the Only Veterans Advisory Committee, I can say I represent 170,000 veterans in Illinois. So they listen to me for that reason, because we do meet quarterly. We have state representatives and state senators on our council. And the veterans, because we are the subject matter experts, we lead the discussion and we bring up our agenda. And I can remember USERA was a great legislation, but USERA did not cover state active duty. So we had to introduce a bill in Illinois called ISERA that covered state active duty. It was 1994, and the Illinois National Guard had spent 6 months on the Mississippi. But that it's a stronger voice that we need. And my biggest problem is getting veterans to pick up the phone and just call their legislator. 10 phone calls will get a state legislator's attention. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to talk to the representative, senator. The staff will note your phone call.
They do. And that's a huge one, especially when calls to action are put out. If you don't know and you're watching this, ROA.org has a call to action section for legislative, anything that we're asking you to participate in on a national level. And I often see things ROA put out by other organizations as well. So it's great because we're all working together as a team, and those community partners, I think, are a pretty interesting thing. I know you said you work a lot with other people in your community that are doing similar work, and it's uniting everyone together.
Absolutely. And coalitions is the way we have to go. And we do have great community partners. And like I said, when we have those meetings, if we're going to have a state senator or a U.S. senator come, we need to have a good audience and let them know that we have concerns. I mean, I'll give you a good issue right now in Illinois, and that is the Fort Sheridan Cemetery. Fort Sheridan was closed. The Army gave our Lake County Forest Preserve 50 acres. It went from an Army cemetery to a national cemetery. The VA has asked for 5 acres to give back so they expand the life of the Fort Sheridan Cemetery for 50 years. We've had to make over 9,000 emails to veterans in Lake County urging them to call a Lake County board member so we can get that 5 acres transferred back to Fort Sheridan to give those soldiers who served a place of honor in our cemetery. It doesn't seem like a big issue, but to get the public to recognize that this is important to the veteran and their families especially.
Well, and with burial too, I mean, I've heard of cases where they've had to move people that have already been interned, and it really is a big deal, especially the families, when you don't know what's going to happen and where people are going and how that's all working out. It could be a really horrible situation. So, and people do have a voice. I think that's one thing that I talk to a lot of people that are my age group. Even I'm just turned 40, and like a lot of us have been veterans that I know for 5 or 6 years if we didn't retire, or some of my friends who stayed in, they're going to be retiring very soon from their time, and I think they don't feel they have a voice in some areas. And I talk to ROA members and they're like, but we did this and then this happened and then we banded together and we wrote this legislation and we talked to these senators, and that's still happening now, wouldn't you say? I think even with the PACT Act, it's been happening now.
Yeah, and the PACT Act, like I said, it will provide those presumptives, because you don't know what's going to happen to you 5-10 years from now, the effects from the burn pits. Or like the PACT Act, it includes now the atomic war veterans who suffered radiation poisoning. That was a forgotten issue for so many years.
Right, and those people waiting for benefits or trying to get treatments and all that, that's what they live with. And so these things are important. And so I thank you so much for your time, and I would love for you to add anything else that you wanted to touch on that maybe we didn't get to.
Well, I have a granddaughter now, a second lieutenant. She's at Fort Hood, Texas. She went field artillery. Her aunt was a medical service corps captain. And then her great aunt was my personnel sergeant for a while. So we have 3 generations of women veterans, and that was such an unusual year. I was going to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas for an AT. I didn't have a personnel officer who became ill. I lost my full-time tech, and I had to go to R% to put my sister on orders to take care of me. And she did a great job as my personnel sergeant. So I thank our women veterans.
Thank you so much. Well, we thank you so much for your service at ROA and for everything that you do for veterans. You've made a huge impact to the organization, and you are very, very well known amongst ROA members. So we thank you. We thank you for all you do. And we'll definitely share this. And if you're watching, listening, these stories are relevant to you. We're still actively working on issues for currently serving Reserve and Guard as well as veterans. If you were ever in the Reserve and Guard at any time, please consider joining, because you wouldn't even believe the amazing people you get to meet and the ways that they can empower you locally to get things done for veterans where you live. and it does affect everybody. And we do have to fight for our own rights to stay and for things that are not correct for us to get involved. I think it's huge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.